Welcome to the Emerging Civil War podcast. I'm Chris Mackowski. Joining me now from Stones River National Battlefield is Chief Ranger Jim Lewis, one of the great legends in the field. Jim, thanks for being with me today.
My pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm trying to find some positive things to say about Phil Sheridan because I'm not a big fan of Little Phil. And so I'm trying to reach out to some folks who might have some positive things to say about him. And at Stones River, I guess I have to give him props. He seems to do a pretty good job. So, what do you think?
Well, I would say that at Stones River is where Phil Sheridan's star begins to rise.
Okay.
Um, a lot of folks who study the Civil War, of course, Phil will go on to almost dominate portions of the Civil War, maybe a little more so than he should. Becomes one of the better recognized names of the war, and of course goes on beyond that into our conflict with Native Americans later on. But um, you know, as we get to the evening of December 30th, 1862, Phil Sheridan's a brigadier general commanding a division within the Army of the Cumberland, and probably not all that well known. Most people wouldn't have been able to pick him out, especially as short as he was. So but his actions at Stones River, if you're looking at it, shows a military mind that he has his eye on the ball,
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, it starts that evening of the 30th. He and Joshua Sill, and the two of them were pretty close. Sill had been moved back to being a brigade, commanding a brigade under Sheridan. For a time, he had been commanding the division that Richard Johnson takes over. And some of us at Stones River are like, boy, maybe if that hadn't happened. Um, but, um, as through the evening of the 30th, as the right wing of the Union Army and Sheridan's division is part of Alexander McCook's right wing, kind of has to literally kind of push and shove and fight its way in the line. Sheridan is more than a little bit concerned about the kind of lack of communication coming out of McCook's headquarters. And so he and Sill both go to McCook late that evening, um, wake McCook up, which kind of tells us where that's going, um, and try to convince him to maybe be a little more forceful for the entire right wing to get themselves ready for the coming fight. General William S. Rosecrans is given sort of a general order of make sure that you make preparations to hold your position and or give ground grudgingly when the day begins, because of his plan to cross the river with Crittenden's left wing and sweep into Murfreesboro. But Sheridan's like, what do you want me to do? And really doesn't get much direction. In fact, one of the interesting things about that story, I'm sure some of the folks that follow the emerging Civil War and dig into it have probably been to Sill's hometown in Ohio and seen the museum there and his brigadier general's coat.
Oh, yeah.
The only reason that survived, because we know Sill gets killed at the Battle of Stones River, and in fact his body is completely plundered by souvenir seekers, probably on the Confederate side. He's basically found in his skivvies when the fight is over. Um, so how in the heck did this coat end up still, getting back? Well, turns out um, that was Sheridan's coat that got stolen.
Oh, okay.
The two of them were about the same height. They're both brigadier generals. They had taken their coats off while they were yakking away with um, uh, McCook. And then as they were heading out, they each just kind of grabbed the coat from the chair, apparently. Sheridan doesn't realize until after the battle is over that he's actually wearing Sill's coat through the battle.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so that's how ultimately it'll work its way back to where you can, kind of get a gander at it
Yeah.
at Sill's home.
So, how does Sheridan get along with his peers? How does he get along with the commanders above him?
Well, obviously, he's not particularly thrilled with Alexander McDowell McCook. Of course, I mean, his nickname is Chucklehead, so there's not a lot of people that seem to get along with him very much. And kind of, if you're looking at Stones River by itself, I kind of understand that. I mean, literally, he walks away from that meeting with nothing. I mean, McCook is issuing essentially no positive orders to any of his division commanders. It's hard to know how he got along with Johnson. I mean, Johnson had only just taken over command of his division, um, just before the campaign begins, really. Probably is a little bit ticked because his boy still gets pushed out when Johnson comes in, but I'm sure he's also very happy that Still is back with him.
Yeah.
Now it seems he works, his brigade commanders, not only Sill but Schaefer and George Roberts. I mean, they all seem to work pretty well together as a team. Um, I mean, they face some of the toughest tests anybody will face at the Battle of Stones River, and it'll actually cost all three of those men their lives by the time it's over. But during the fighting itself, and how Sheridan and his brigadiers and the men under him fight shows us that they work pretty well together as a cohesive team.
Yeah.
Because he walks away, okay, fine, I'm not getting anything from the cook. I don't care. He issues orders down through his own chain of command. Um, my men are going to be up at about 4 o'clock in the morning, so well before sunrise, and we're going to be in line, ready to fight whatever comes our way. Um, that is, now he's not the only one that will do that. And, Jefferson Davis will do the same thing. And yeah, I don't really know much about him and his relationship
Yeah.
with Davis. Although they seem to be like-minded, at least in this extent. The two of them are basically like, fine, don't tell us what to do. We'll take care of it ourselves.
Yeah.
Sadly, though, for the story of the Battle of Stones River, Richard Johnson, not so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
The very right of the right wing will be essentially unprepared when the Confederates hit it right there. So, and then you know, when Johnson's division evaporates within probably 20, 30 minutes, that thing is shredded. Davis will do what he can, but he's got Confederates, into his right flank and into his rear almost immediately. He starts going away. But Sheridan, through the 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, for several hours, is fighting this kind of series of you know defenses, counterattacks, repositioning, and kind of refusing the right flank of his line, turning it up towards the Wilkinson Pike, keeping his guys intact to the point they can make that kind of stand with Negley up there from about 10 till noon in the rocks and the trees, or the area we call the slaughter pen. And you kind of have to look at that and go, dang, this guy knows what he's doing. um,
It's probably not an exaggeration to say he saves the day for the Union Army.
okay. No, yeah, I guess it wouldn't be an exaggeration, although I do have to admit, when I first got to Stones River and saw the little, one of our little interpretive signs that says Sheridan saves the day,
Yeah.
there in the rocks. And I'm like, well, wait, what about Negley? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Negley was actually the pivot upon which Sheridan makes his movement. But the two of them together, particularly from that 10 to noon period, working together, knowing they're essentially, Rosecrans has basically told them, you guys are on your own. He's busy now making his new line along the Nashville Pike, and he's essentially using those two divisions as a shield to kind of keep the enemy away long enough to make that happen. He's just,
Yeah.
he's sacrificing them to save the rest of the army, and they hunker down and do it. So yeah, I mean, and and that kind of running retreat, when you see the other two divisions beyond him have not been able to do that, I think that is a testament to his ability, with at least within that division, to have created a pretty cohesive team.
Hmm. So, how do you feel that how does he handle himself as the battle then continues and wraps up over the course of it? Because we tend to think of him in that action with Negley at the slaughter pen, but the battle goes on for a bit longer. It's more than just that. How does he handle himself for the rest of it?
Well, of course, once they're driven out of the slaughter pen, yeah, they're beaten and battered. I mean, of all the units in the Union Army, I don't know of any of them that were more actively engaged for as long a period of time as them, other than, say, Colonel William B. Hazen's brigade at Hell's Half Acre.
Sure.
I mean, he's in the fight. Hazen's in the fight from what 10 till basically sunset.
Uh,
And Sheridan, he's going to get hit from the front by about 7 a.m. and fight all the way till noon. So I mean, that's a
uh,
pretty, those of us that kind of, most Civil War units don't find themselves in like active fighting like that for so long.
right.
They will retreat kind of behind that horseshoe shaped line that ultimately Rosecrans is able to form. And then Sheridan will actually act as a reserve. Even though his guys are tore up, he will actually send now to be Luther Bradley, who's commanding Robert's brigade, but Bradley will be sent up farther to the right to help shore things up as the fighting is raging along Asbury Lane on the kind of right end of that line. And then Frederick Schaefer, who's his last remaining, basically Roberts and Sill are killed in the early stages of the fight leading into the slaughter pen. Um, Schaefer will survive that, but on the left of the Union line, across the railroad tracks from where Hazen and his men are fighting in the Round Forest, of course, through the afternoon, there's some pretty heavy fighting as Bragg keeps throwing more and more troops in, trying to break that, or if not break, at least press the left side of the Union line hard enough to suck as many troops to that area as possible,
Yeah.
giving his guys a chance to break through the Nashville Pike. And now Sheridan himself will not be part of this fight, but he will order Schaefer to go and support Wagner's brigade there. And it's that area, that 42 acres that was recently
All right.
um, saved by the American Battlefield Trust. And Schaefer will lead his brigade in a charge that will turn back one of the more successful presses by the Confederates, and in the process lose his life
Jeez.
and become the last of Sheridan's three brigade commanders to perish during the Battle of Stones River.
Wow.
So it doesn't necessarily pay to work for Sheridan. Um, but he's a combat, in that this battle, he's a combat division commander, which means you gotta, fight him like a junkyard dog.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Which is what this division does. I mean, I don't know, given the beating they had taken in the morning, to have them even in some way, shape, or form ready to go at it again in the afternoon.
Right.
Um, that also impresses if you're just
Yeah.
sheerly on a military tactical standpoint. He somehow pulled it all together and is still able to use the men under his command to impact and sway the outcome of the fight.
Wow. So, if I'm looking for nice things to say about Sheridan, um, what would you say the main things would be as takeaways from Stones River?
Well, one, he is certainly aware of the situation. Sheridan, even at the level he was as a division commander, so he's certainly not getting all of the information that everybody has. Is able to take in what he, from the experience he's getting, the reports he's getting in from his own people, and that, you know, the prompting of him to reach up the chain of command and ask for better guidance, maybe hoping to prompt a little more um, awareness of the danger
Yeah.
that they were in. I mean, he certainly called it.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. So I mean, that has to impress some. And then, like, yeah, like I said, I mean, although he does not always have a track record of being the easiest person to get along with, and is some would see him as a little self-aggrandizing. Um, you know, that division, you know, and those three brigades did some pretty heavy lifting. And that speaks well of, I think, everybody from the privates in the line, up through their company and regimental commanders. But I mean, they managed to pull something off there with that kind of retrograde wheeling motion, that mm, you don't see a whole lot of happening on in the mess and chaos of a battle. So they had their stuff wired tight. And I do believe that, I mean, it will take some time yet. I mean, he will remain in command of that division for some time, but I think one of the reasons we will eventually see him move to the Eastern Theater and, get his own command, is that when the reports start coming in from Stones River, there are going to be some people that take notice of the fact that Phil Sheridan did his job and then some, during the Battle of Stones River, and that maybe this is somebody we can trust to do bigger and better things.
Yeah. As you look ahead to that career after he leaves Stones River and he begins his ascent, any final assessments you might offer from what you've been able to see, in your perch as the present, looking backwards at that ascent? Any final assessments of Sheridan's career?
Well, I mean, I think overall he had a pretty successful career. I mean, um, his work in the East is decidedly different now. Eventually he's finally got to do what he wants to do and have a be in the cavalry. Although I do wonder, um, so during, at least through the Civil War period, I mean, I remain generally pretty impressed by him as a soldier. I mean, he proves to be generally not one of those guys that gets promoted past his abilities,
Okay.
so to speak. Um, his post Civil War career is, decidedly different, but we are talking about a decidedly different period in our nation's history as well. So it's not like he wasn't in good company, um, with what was going on with the fight we were having with the Native Americans at that point.
Right.
Um, but I don't know that necessarily detracts. And still during that though, he makes a pretty effective commander.
Right. Right.
So I guess for me with Sheridan, I look more at that military, at his ability as a soldier, as a leader. Leaving aside some of the things that might leave a bad taste in your mouth, he is certainly diligent and effective at his job.
Great. Well, Jim, I appreciate you letting me pick your brain for a minute as I'm
Yeah.
trying to better understand a guy that I have traditionally not liked all that much. So you've given me lots to think about. I appreciate
Well, I think you're in good company too. There's a lot of people that didn't like him back then too.
it.
But that's the name of the game sometimes. I mean, you know, um, some of your really greatest generals might be maybe loved by their men, but if you talk to their counterparts
Yeah,
that they
right.
kind of work with, maybe not so much. So yeah, I mean, when the human factor comes in and the relationships thing, I mean, that's kind of a tough thing. But even despite that, yeah, again, going back to Stones River, I mean, maybe seems fairly certain he was friends with Sill, but maybe Schaefer and Roberts held other opinions of him. But when push came to shove and they got down to doing the job that they had before them, they worked like a well oiled machine.
Yeah.
And that's, some of that's got to fall on Sheridan.
Right. Yeah, it comes back to leadership. So, Jim, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, buddy. Great talking with you. Hope we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely.